I would support Dr. Rai Chaudhary with an example of the current period of my personal experience in, MC Square, MC2, probably you know this, Texas, MC Square, this is under Texas Austin. And it's a research university. It was previously a department of Austin. And I had a lecture on leadership only for the scholars. There were 12 people only. But I found at the end of it, more or less 50% are from Kolkata, from India. They are doing research. And that's a place where, fundamental research about the next generation computers are going on. And that's the place where the first generation was also developed. There I found, what is the approach to do the research? They're doing fundamental, they're doing technological, both. Now, when people who are doing fundamental, they've got a lot of models. Now, there is an assignment to everybody, including the person heading. The person heading is an alumni of Jadavpur University. I believe he is also now. I'm talking about 2010 interaction at MC Square. Now, the person heading at that point of time was, I believe he is still there. Now, for the person doing fundamental, even the head has to have an assignment. So that assignment is developed by the others. If I'm the head, I can give an assignment to you. If you are in my team, you will give an assignment to me. So that's the kind of democracy they have. So assume that I am the head, I have an assignment. So I had an interaction and I understood the assignment is, the divergence has to be measured. If my core focus is something, let's say developing a thinking chip, if that is the core focus, then what is the divergence I have to measure, and the highest is the best. If from the center I've gone to the extreme periphery and the periphery is a longer distance than others, that radius is higher than others, then I'm better off. So see, that's what is, the kind of extension of the concept of integration. In our country, this combo learning is not yet a popular thing. Some people had introduced, but it is ridiculed by the government. Because, it's all, controlled, dominated by the government. I've seen in a meeting when the secretary interns or the vice chancellor stand up and put a salute to the secretary. That's very good. I don't want to humiliate any person. Secretary is a good person, could be the best person on earth. But I have a superior respect for the academicians. The academicians should be having that kind of integrity within to have a faith in themselves. This is actually receding, missing. And we need to have inspiration from. Sir Ashutosh is the inspiration. Sir Ashutosh is the inspiration. When he could say that, you're giving me money and putting a condition against, I'm the last person. You will get a lot of people to absorb that, poison pill. I'm not going to absorb and, swallow the poison pill that you are putting across. I will rather say that, okay, let that be a logical take for others or a happy take for others. Sorry, not for me. We need people of this kind of outstanding, character. We need this kind of people of outstanding, approach. One last point, again from my personal experience, I'll share with you all, that's an inspiration. Acharya Shyotendranath Bose. I had a, fortune, rather great fortune. I consider one of the greatest fortunes as an individual of coming in touch with him for some time, visiting him at his house for some time, 1.5, 2 years only at the last period. Seeing what a profound person as an individual, and if the individual is not such, the individual cannot contribute to human society that scale which the world is still struggling to connect. Even after Higgs boson, I would say it's not even halfway of what he intended to discover as a truth. What a great personality. If you have brought in a small mathematical puzzle, a page is there, I make this page like this, curvature. So I said, sir, this side I can develop a curvature. I can develop mathematics for the curvature. Can you tell me how to develop a mathematics of the reverse side? What could be the input thoughts for that? He forgets about taking tea. He forgets about talking to big people. A very young person meets him, asks a question. He responds to that first. And responses in a few minutes time, it's all over, and the person, I think I had learned. And the person learns. This is a great personality. And this is an integral person. A person who has a better mind for the society, a person who has got a better mind for others, a person who is not hankering after only me, as Swami Vivekananda had said, not me but thou, a person who has developed that kind of character, a person who is thoroughly imbued with the values, who is immersed in values, who is embodiment of values, a person of that kind of greatness, yet a person of competence, very high degree of skill unmasked. That's what is our perspective of an integral personality. I believe that that's need of the hour, that's need of the future, and let's begin from somewhere in our country. And as we had a thought and discussion in the Bengal Chamber Education team, we have an aspiration that, we kindle this lamp somewhere, sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request my team member Sharbani to request R.P. Banerjee to hand over a memento to Dr. Partho Ghosh. Thank you. By this we end with this session, and we will join back after the lunch. The lunch is served at the Palladian Lounge. We are all requested to join us for lunch. And we are going to start the next session at 2:30. So request you all to be here by 2:30. Thank you so much. We would also request Professor Ashish Banerjee to be on the dais, please. Professor Ashish Banerjee will be the moderator of this panel discussion. I would request Professor Banerjee to start off with today's discussion.
At this juncture, and all of us are aware of the hard times the leading economies are going through, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the fact that the other economies which fall under BRICS category are also going to go through hard times, because the negative effect of the powerful economies of the West will definitely have an impact on the BRICS economies. In fact, I have been telling about this in the classrooms for a long time, that the BRICS fairy tale which has been woven in the West is untrue. And that story is unfolding. You can see what is happening in Brazil. I'm sure all of you are aware of the incidents happening in Brazil. We have nothing much to say about Russia, South Africa, and other countries under BRICS. There are several things we can talk about, but one important parameter is the growth rate. If you see the current growth rates of these economies, you'll be convinced that at least in the last quarter and last half of the last financial year, that the BRICS story is untrue, is gradually unfolding. India is not excluded, because I had discussed in the classrooms with my students that 6, 7%, 8% growth rate which the ministers are predicting for the next 2 years is certainly not going to happen. The growth rate is going to fall below 5%. Last quarter, the growth rate has fallen to 4.9% as reported by the Government of India. And my apprehension is that this growth rate is gradually going to creep down to the Hindu rate of growth. So under these circumstances, the two most important things we should emphasize in education are creativity and knowledge. And I think we could not find a better speaker to start this session than Professor Malavika Sarkar, who is very well known to all of you, needs no introduction. We are also honored by the presence of Sri E. Islam, Director of Birla Institute, Birla Industrial and Technological Museum, which is under Government of India. So without wasting time, I would request Professor Malavika Sarkar to enlighten all of us. Thank you. Yes, please.
It is a privilege for me to be asked to come and speak at this session on Sir Ashutosh Mukhopadhyay at the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, this one-day conference on creativity and knowledge, the role of education. I was involved in the planning for this conference, and at that time, when I was asked to speak on this subject, I took it very seriously and decided that it deserved a beautifully crafted paper. Unfortunately, because of so many other commitments that I have, I only managed to jot down a few scraps on the sidelines of other meetings that I was attending. So you'll have to forgive me for the quality of the paper that I present to you, because in the first instance, the title itself is a very, very challenging one. These three terms, creativity, knowledge, and education, how do we bring them together? In what kind of relationship? But first, about the occasion for this afternoon's session. Remembrance is always an act of homage. Remembering Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee throughout the day today, on the occasion of his 150th birth anniversary, we have been acknowledging his contribution in many fields. He left his mark as a Vice-Chancellor with vision and energy. He had a keen eye for talent and was able to identify and attract excellent faculty for the university. A double MA in mathematics and physics, he was both innovative and a strong upholder of traditional forms of knowledge. It is appropriate that on this occasion we should examine the role of education in relation to two key areas, creativity and knowledge. I begin with a little bit of misgivings. Education in India is today at the crossroads. On the one hand, education seems to be flourishing as never before. Schools of various kinds for children from varying economic backgrounds and with different sets of expectations are mushrooming everywhere. Higher education is imparted through a dazzling range of institutions: central universities, state universities, and private universities, IITs, IISERs, IIMs, and research institutes. At the end of the day, though, Are we producing young people with knowledge? Or are we producing young people with a set of skills? Knowledge itself has become a contested site. If we look at a classic text, such as Bertrand Russell's Human Knowledge, Its Scope and Limits, published in 1948, some of the many complexities of our understanding of knowledge immediately become clear. Russell's book is part of the series that begins with The Problems of Philosophy, 1912, and Our Knowledge of the External World, and continues into An Inquiry into Meaning and Truth, 1950. Early in Human Knowledge, Its Scope and Limits, in the section on the science of mind, Russell makes a distinction between two ways of knowing. What do we know, and how do we know it? The sciences, including physics and astronomy, deal with verifiable data, which, to quote Russell, tries to be as impersonal and as dehumanized as possible, and apparently deal only with what is large and what is universal. The sciences deal with what we know. Facts and figures are two terms most of us commonly, repeatedly associate with science. But there is another dimension in knowing or knowledge. This relates to the question of how we know. Knowledge about how we know lies in the realm of psychology. Knowledge then seems to have two domains, the public and the private. However, Russell suggests, and I quote him, "The apparent publicity of our world is in part delusive and in part inferential. All the raw material of our knowledge consists of mental events in the lives of separate people. Knowledge, in other words, is never wholly objective." I draw attention to Russell's analysis because it helps us to understand the primacy of the individual mind in the acquisition of knowledge. And I think it is important to remind ourselves of this at this point in time, because education, it seems to me, is becoming increasingly regimented. We are focusing too much on information. We are programming young minds. Except in rare cases, we are not leaving any time or leisure for the mind to blossom. It is a matter of grave concern. Are we, through education, helping to develop creative minds, or are we simply producing enablers? For, in the ultimate analysis, knowledge will not progress without creativity. The greatest discoveries in the sciences were only produced by creative minds. When Kepler discovered the elliptical orbit of Mars, it was not only through mathematical calculations that he arrived at his findings. He had the creative imagination to look beyond mathematical findings towards a projected model. So too with any other great scientist, including Presidency's own Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose. So too also with a historian's reconstruction of past history. Imparting knowledge purely as information limits the individual. Knowledge that opens minds, encourages creativity, is the ultimate desired object. Coming back to the three terms of this afternoon's topic, creativity, knowledge, and education, the simple fact is that creativity and knowledge together make up true education. In his 1975 Nora and Edward Ryerson lecture at the University of Chicago, the eminent theoretical astrophysicist Subramanian Chandrasekhar asks, if there are, I quote, creativity is a term that has too often been associated only with the arts and a little bit with the humanities, mainly with the arts, and hardly ever with the sciences, where it does very much belong. Chandrasekhar's lecture is on the title, intriguing title, Shakespeare, Newton, and Beethoven, or Patterns of Creativity. And he makes a number of very interesting points there. He says that creation or the creative ability reaches fulfillment late in an artist's career. The examples that he draws to our attention are from Beethoven and from Shakespeare. From Shakespeare, quite rightly, he says that all of his great works, the tragedies, the comedies, the histories, eventually lead to his greatest achievements, and that is the last plays, Tempest, Winter's Tale. With Beethoven again, he again points out that Beethoven's great work progressed through decades, reaching its very height, its absolute perfection in the last string quartets. An artist's creativity, therefore, he suggests, reaches its full potential only late in life. On the other hand, he says, look at science. Newton was 42 years old when he wrote the Principia, his greatest achievement. In science, he goes on to suggest that the greatest, the most productive years are at a much younger age than for the arts. This is the difference in the graph of development that appears to be there in creativity, in the arts and the sciences. But whatever be the difference in age profile, what is common is that creativity is an integral part of the learning process. Development is a combination of knowledge and creativity. And again, Chandrasekhar goes on to point out, it is important for us to remember that the perception of beauty is an integral part of this whole process. He goes on to quote from Heisenberg, and I can't resist quoting this definition from Heisenberg, where Heisenberg says, beauty is the proper conformity of the parts to one another and to the whole. And again, if nature leads us to mathematical forms of great simplicity and beauty, by forms I'm referring to coherent systems of hypotheses, etc. You must have felt this too, the almost frightening simplicity and wholeness of the relationships which nature suddenly spreads out before us, and for which none of us was in the least prepared. Anyone who has been reading Galileo or Newton will be aware of the great importance that these two great scientists placed on the sense of beauty. I realize that I am been venturing further and further afield into the many avenues that this fascinating subject, creativity and knowledge, the role of education, allows. It is time to head towards the conclusion. My conclusion essentially is an appeal that the entire education program, especially school education, needs to change. The way school education is headed, it is information-packed, but there is no space for leisure. Unless there is space for the mind to wander, for a young mind or a young student to be able to stare at a blank wall, look out through the window, unless these things are to happen, there will be no creativity and ultimately no true knowledge. After all, if we are focusing on creativity at this session, there is no better text to remind ourselves of than Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, with its great lines about creativity, where Wordsworth is talking about remembering the region around Tintern Abbey and talks about the mood of creativity as that blessed mood where the burden of the mystery, where this heavy and weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on until the breath of this corporeal frame and the very motion of our human blood, suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. That quiet eye that Wordsworth talks about is something that we now in the world of education seem to have forgotten altogether. But it is essentially that quality of rich leisure that can only lead to true education, the kind of education in which creativity and knowledge can come together. Today, when we are celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, who was such a forward-looking person, who could bring so many disparate worlds together, encourage young minds, I think we need to reflect, to think again, and to pay very close attention first to primary education, where perhaps things have gone very badly wrong. Build up from there to higher education. And I'm very happy to say, this I cannot resist saying, because as anyone who's been listening to me over the past several months knows, I'm absolutely obsessed with presidency, so I cannot help but bring in presidency at the end, that what we have done in devising the new curriculum of presidency is to pay close attention to this, that we are here not just to impart information to young people, we are here to help them go forward, to seek things, to find things for themselves. Education is no education if we have not taught young minds to discover things for themselves. If we are only feeding information into them like feeding things into a computer, that is not education. I'm happy to say that at Presidency, the new curriculum we have designed pays very close attention to this fact,